All This is Billy Bedlam 66 coming at you again, and happy Halloween. Got me a top hat, put my costume together slowly. Basically, I'm going as an English vampire. We're more gentlemanlike compared to the American cokehead, you know, the whole new moon crap, new age BMW freak vampires. No, 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 no. Those ain't real vampires. The real vampire is a mystery, you never even see them coming. They're there, then they're gone. Boom. You wake up with two holes in your neck if you wake up at all. Anyways, I told you I was going to do a Halloween show, and I am definitely going to do one. You will see, which way am I looking? Yeah. Right there is my pumpkin. I've got the place decorated just like I always do every year. I used to drive everyone nuts when I was a kid. The whole yard, you know, pumpkins everywhere lit up. I went out and lit them every night. Just had all kinds of fun. So it's still a fun holiday for me. I go to a Halloween party every year, a couple of days before Halloween. Some hotties there, some nice 30, 40, and a couple of hot 50-year-old women. Not bad, I'm 49, so I'm looking in the range from 40 to 50 years old. Oh, yeah. Anyways, let's go ahead and get started. We've all heard all kinds of stories. I've got one here saved. Let me bring it up here. Um, if I can find it here. And, there we go. This is something that I saved. I thought it would be really cool here. Um, yeah, let me bump up the view. Zoom in. Okay, yeah. Alrighty. These are American Best Ghost Stories. I've collected them from across the web. Some of them are pretty well known because TV shows have been done about these. Um, the first one is called the Moundsville Penitentiary. Is in operation for a little more than 100 years in West Virginia, and it was a correctional facility for some of the most violent offenders in America. Many of them were transferred there from other prisons because they became too violent for the other prisons. Um, there was a lot of executions going on by electric chair, um, or hangings. Some were murdered by other prisoners. It closed in 1995, but uh, the people who continued to do security, and now it's like a tourist spot, say that they've heard things in there that you can hear. People screaming, men screaming. You can hear things clanking around, those kinds of things. Typical haunting. If you're interested, um, it's at 818 Jefferson Avenue, Moundsville, West Virginia. Um, so you can look that up on Google and it will tell you where to find it. I guess they do have tours that still go through there, so that's quite interesting. Then there is the next one. Now this is the one that I think Ghost Hunters did a thing on, if I remember right, and it's a Trans-Allegheny or Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. This was for the criminally insane. This wasn't just for some idiot that was hearing voices or something. This was for the really bad of the baddies. It was known as Weston State Hospital. It started in 1864. It closed in 1994, and they say that hundreds of people died according to the description. They said the spirits that haunt the site date back to the Civil War era when the asylum's grounds served as a military post. They do give paranormal tours of the facility for 2-hour visits, and then there's 4 main hotspots, and then if you really want to go on an intense 8-hour overnight paranormal adventure, they got that too. That one is at 71 Asylum Drive, Weston, West Virginia. So Google that, and they'll tell you how to get there. So, and that was another one. You know that there's all kinds of things that go on there. Hot spots are actually kind of a misnomer. They're actually cold spots. Really, what it is they're very cold places. You walk in there and you just stop dead because like, whoa, what is this? So that's another interesting one. They had some really wild murders. And I guess this guy's got a YouTube video where he collected the data from it. So when you look that up using Google, you will probably find this guy's website too. He talks about they were doing experiments at this hospital, which they do it probably all of them. You've heard of things like they take out portions of the brain to try and cure mental illness. In the 1800s, women who were psychotic, they were fumigating their vagina, things like that. Doctors were doing that. They thought if they fumigated the vagina, women would not be insane anymore. And it's like, well, that might help with social diseases, but I don't think it's going to help with demons. But it was freaky, man. Man, I'll tell you, in the early days of psychiatry, it's no wonder some of these places are haunted with some of the freaky stuff that doctors were doing. Makes you wonder who's crazier, you know? Is it the doctor or the patient? But one of they had what's called the Villisca Axe Murder House. This, I don't know if this is related to the insane asylum or not. They kind of got them together here. Now this one I've never heard of, but it's they're saying on June 10th, 1912, an old white farmhouse at 508 East 2nd Street became a grisly crime scene. The heinous murder of Josiah Moore and his wife, their 4 children, and 2 young girls who were overnight guests rocked the small town of Valeska, Iowa. Okay, so it's a different thing. Okay, so there's a state down there. The murderer was never identified. Over the years, according to this, the residents of the home reported visions of a man with an axe, children crying, and unexplained paranormal activity. In 1994, the home was restored to its original condition with no indoor plumbing or electricity. These touches add to the chilling ambiance during a lamplight tour from April through November, or an overnight experience available by reservation for groups. And that is 508 East 2nd Street, Valeska, Iowa. Google that and see what comes up there. This next one, and you'll find a lot of stuff that goes back to the Old West days. You know, we have a really freaky, very unhealthy love affair with the Old West days. And guys, it's not like what you see in the movie. It was 1,000 times worse. I mean, you think you have trouble today with some gangbanger, you know, popping caps down on somebody? Shh, that was nothing compared to the Old West days. The Old West days were horrible in this country. I mean, rape, robbery, murder, prostitution, gambling. I mean, there's a reason why they called it the Wild Wild West. You know, I mean, it was just bad. Anyways, this next story is about a prostitute known as Sammy Dean. This occurred in Jerome, Arizona, which is a former copper mining town with a paranormal reputation that dates back to the Wild West. That town was home to just 400 residents back then. It was, well, down from 15,000 in its heyday. That was probably back then. But legend has it there are plenty of ghost residents from the day of the mining accidents and gunfights. One well-known spirit is the working girl, Sammy Dean, a prostitute who was strangled by a customer in the old Crib district. Her beautiful spirit roams the alleys looking for her killer, who is never found. And that's Jerome, Arizona. Once again, Google that. that because that's an old west town, it probably got tours that go through there, take you through everything down there. This next one is the Cuban Club in, let's see, where is it? Tampa. Wow, it's in Tampa. Uh, in the Tampa Ybor City neighborhood in 1917, this spot was a popular hangout for Cuban immigrants who enjoyed the ballroom, outdoor uh, band, and cantina with a stage and dance floor. Today, the compound, which is protected by the National Historic Register, hosts concerts and special events, and is the setting for many ghost stories about spirits playing the piano and riding the elevators. That is 2010 Avenida República de Cuba, Ybor City, Florida. Look it up. If you're down in Florida, go check it out. Find out if she's really haunted or not. Alrighty, so now the next one is actually an old military reservation called Fort Mifflin. Built in 1771, Fort Mifflin is the country's only Revolutionary War battlefield that is still intact. There are 14 restored buildings on the grounds on the Delaware River and reportedly plenty of ghosts from the past. Ghosts are said to haunt the fort. Screaming woman who cries are so loud that the Philadelphia police have been called to investigate, only to find no one there. Other characters in local ghost stories include a faceless man wandering around the fort, a tour guide dressed in revolutionary garb, and numerous children and dogs. So that sounds like a really haunted place, and that is in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 82 Fort Mifflin Road. If you're in that area, check that one out. Okay, here's our next one. It's called Moon River Brewery. This it serves alcohol now, but the building is one of the oldest in town, dating back to 1821. In its original incarnation, it was a city hotel, as a high-end hotel with a history of violence during the Civil War. Men were killed in the hotel during heated skirmishes, including a Yankee who was beaten to death by locals in 1860. Some bar patrons today say they've seen bottles mysteriously fly through the air and have witnessed guests being pushed, touched, and even slapped by unseen forces. One resident apparition, Toby, is said to skulk around the billiards room looking for the next great brawl, and that is at 21 Bay Street, Savannah, Georgia. If you're ever in Savannah, look the place up. It's currently like a pub type bar. Go in there, get a beer, see what happens. Hopefully the ghosts won't steal your wallet or your beer. Alright, let's look at the next one on the great list here. It's called the Sultan's Palace. This is at 716 Dauphine Street in the French Quarter, and it has the old classic wrought iron balconies and a large courtyard. In the 1800s, this residence was a house of horrors for the Sultan, a wealthy man with a depraved lifestyle, multiple wives and children, and a harem of women and young boys held against their will. Neighbors complained about the mysterious habits of this man who had a predilection for partying, opium, and torture. But the greatest mystery in the house was the Sultan's demise, when he was buried alive in the courtyard after his family and harem were hacked to pieces in a bloodbath by an unknown perpetrator. Today, his angry spirit is thought to be responsible for the unusual noises, loud music, and strong incense smells that waft from the home, as well as unwelcome advances on past female residents who swear the Sultan is still up to his old tricks of groping female visitors. Whoa! And that is at 716 Dauphine Street, New Orleans, Louisiana. If you're down there, ever get that way, check it out. And by the way, if you have checked any of these places out, or if you have a really good ghost story, put it in the messages, and I'll talk about it if you want me to. I can research stuff pretty good, more than just on the web. I can usually call a place if it's open to the public and get their promotional literature, and a lot of times they'll even talk about the ghosts in their promotional literature. So yeah, if you got a link, send it to me. This next one is called the Calcasieu Courthouse. Let's see. Tony Jo Henry has been the talk of the small town of Lake Charles since the 1940s when she killed a man in cold blood. Just as notorious were her stunning good looks, the former prostitute charmed a gentleman in a pickup truck to give her a ride while she was walking the highway with a friend en route to spring her true love from the Texas prison, a Texas prison. It took 3 trials for a jury to convict the wily Tony Jo, who had charmed the courtroom and jail staff and divided the town over her presumed guilt. In 1942, this murderous beauty known as Tiger Girl was the first woman in the state to die in the electric chair. Her spirit lingers in the courthouse today, and workers there swear they feel her presence, hear her screams, and even smell her burning hair. Many believe that she tinkers with office equipment, locks doors, and meddles with everyday life at the courthouse. That one is at 1000 Ryan Street in Lake Charles, Louisiana. If you're there, I mean, it's a courthouse, but, go in and ask them, say, hey, can I look around? And, you never know. You might find something interesting. Okay, this next one is Eastern State Penitentiary. The former prison was the first of its kind thanks to its large size and substantial budget. Directed by Quaker beliefs, it had the infamously strict rules which encouraged isolation and punishment. Prison guards took to hooding inmates whenever they ventured outside their cells, and the only source of light was a skylight which was believed to bring the prisoners the light of God. Tortured spirits, including Slick Willie Sutton, continue to relentlessly haunt the grounds today. A lot of these penitentiaries are like that. You'll hear stories like that about a lot of them, even some that are still currently in use. Even though it's hard to get information, you will hear a story once in a while where a jail guard came out, and said, I'm not going to work there anymore. I don't care how much money they pay me. There's noises at night, things like that. Alcatraz is supposed to be haunted. There was a famous psychic that went in there through the 80s, and he couldn't stand it. It was so cold in some spots, and he says, there was a murderer here, and he lived in this cell, and just, and I can't remember his name, Peter something, but I remember watching that, and it was some paranormal show. I can't remember now, but he totally freaked out. So it doesn't surprise me. Prisons are violent places where horrible things happen. Prisoners returning to haunt those places doesn't surprise me at all. That one is at 2027 Fairmount Avenue, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So if you're ever down that way, go check it out. Okay, and I think that was all there is for that one. There's haunted towns. I've heard of that. We have a couple here in Colorado. Some of these towns are actually still occupied, so they're not really ghost towns, but they are haunted. One of them is Wattenberg. That's just northwest of Brighton, Colorado, here where I live. It was at one time kind of an immigrant community for migrants, but there was a lot of old gypsies that lived there back in the 40s and 50s too, and a lot of fights out there. I know they always warned kids from Brighton High School not to go out there, not to go buy drugs or anything. A lot of violence and stuff. I remember a couple of guys I knew from junior high that went riding horses out there, and they went out there at night. And this is in the early 80s when the migrants pretty much ran the town. And there's no sheriff, it's not even officially incorporated as a town. There's no police, there's no mayor, no nothing. It's just just a name on a map to a bunch of Quonset huts and half-ass houses that barely stand up. But these kids that say you go out there at night and you'd hear screaming and yelling and you couldn't see where it was coming from, and shadows moving across the road and stuff like that. And I went riding out there with them during the day, and I can see why you would get paranoid. It's not a town like a normal town. It's shanties. It's basically a shanty town, really. Some old-fashioned Quonset huts, that kind of thing for migrant labor and everything. Spooky stuff, it just really weird stuff. But we got some ghost towns up in the mountains. Uh, I'll have to look those up. I know I had a book on them somewhere. But anyways, let's go into these other towns that are supposed to be haunted. The first one that I always remember that was always famous was Bodie, California. And it's the most famous ghost town. It was founded in 1859 after William Bradley discovered gold near what's called Bodie Bluffs in the eastern Sierras. There was originally 200 people there. And then it's considered one of the coldest places outside of Alaska. Here's another one, Elk Falls, Kansas. I've only briefly heard about this one. This goes back to the 1870s. There's an annual tour that goes through that one. Now they're saying on this that these are haunted towns, but I don't know if you could call it haunted. The other one is Kennecott, Alaska. It's 60 it's at the end of a 60-mile dirt road in the middle of Wrangell St. Elias National Park. It sits adjacent to a lucrative copper mill. Today, all of the original buildings and some of the surrounding assayer facilities remain owned by the National Park Service. The town has become a living museum. Wow. And then the next one is St. Elmo, Colorado. It includes a general store that is still open between May and October. It dates back to the 1870s when gold and silver were found nearby in the Rocky Mountains. It became a station on the Denver South Park and Pacific Railroad. Then many of the buildings have been purchased by private owners and such like. So I don't know that you would call these haunted. It's hard to tell. They list them as haunted. But anyways, I'm going to kind of get into some of this other stuff. We talk about a lot of haunted places. What goes bump in the night, those kinds of things. I can tell you I've had a few weird experiences over the years, not many, just enough to convince me that there's something beyond this world, something that collides with us in this world from time to time. It's like the two worlds kind of intermesh and then go back their own separate ways. That's what it seems like to be like to me. Back in 2004, we moved again. We'd moved around quite a bit since I'd gone to DIT and everything. Got a house south of town. It's an older house, fairly cheap, wasn't a big deal price-wise. But it was strange from the very day we moved in. It was late 2004, I think September, October of 2004. Anyways, one night I'm snoozing on the couch. I've been watching all these movies on UFOs and stuff, and so who knows what was going on in my mind and whether my mind was tricking me or not, but the couch faced so that you could look into the kitchen from the living room. And something woke me up about 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't know what it was, but I just woke up and I looked towards the kitchen, and here's this guy in this old suit. He looked like he is from the 30s or 40s, and he's pushing a box across the floor. And he turns and he looks at me like this, and he goes, "What?" and disappeared. I mean, I'm sitting there, I'm like, I've still got to be asleep. What the hell is this? It was freaky, And there's other things. I've been asleep at night, and I'm not kidding you, it's like somebody brushes right by me, and it's like, whoa, what is this? It freaks my bird too. He kind of gets freaked. His feathers get kind of ruffled. We're snoozing at night, and I pull the cover only halfway down on his cage so he can see under and see out and look over to my bed and see me, so he knows I'm alright, and then he's cool. Man, I'll tell you, he just, man, this was weird. because you could hear him like he was like growling in there, and then he looked down under the cover like, Master, what the hell was that? So whatever it was, he saw it too. There's no doubt that he saw or felt it or sensed it. So it kind of freaked him out too. Um, I've had weird experiences going back to childhood. A lot of people do a lot of weird things. Um, every once in a great while, it didn't happen too often. It's happened in later years, here in about the last 10 years or so. The feeling of being watched when there's nobody around. I think we've all had that to a certain extent. This whole, whew, who, you're looking around, you're going, who the hell's there? You look to the left, you look to the right, and you're like, what is this? What is going on? And you're checking the place out. If you're outside, you're looking up and down the street, you're looking in the windows of the homes next door. Is somebody, peeking out the window at me? Is there somebody sitting in a car somewhere? You're getting kind of freaky because you're kind of worried that there's something not right. You can kind of get the idea, whether you're hallucinating or not, imagining things, whatever. You kind of get that feeling, and it's not right, but there's something there, and you might think that you're possibly paranoid. You might be thinking, watch too many horror movies. But what if you hadn't for a long time? What if you're thinking straight? You're outside coming in with the groceries at night, and all of a sudden you get this weird feeling. I definitely think that there's something that watches us from time to time. You get this story from hunters that are up in the mountains, in various mountain ranges around the country, from the Rocky Mountains to the Sierras. And of course, they're in areas where there's possibly Bigfoot type creatures. And they'll say they get the sense that they're being watched. If they have a hunting dog with them, the dog is not real thrilled either. Sometimes you'll have somebody with them that are really, really super sensitive, and they'll be like, "Hey, we're being watched." So you get the idea. I think we've all had it happen. It's weird. It's definitely not right. You can sense when there's something wrong. There's something out there. You just don't know what. Just some of the things that I look at, and we look at paranormal encounters. You wonder just what crosses over into this world and what may be here with us. And it brings me to my next thing that I've seen. And Art Bell and George Norrie have both talked about them. Art Bell's was off the air. I think he's back on with a new show, but he doesn't have Coast to Coast. But George Norrie on Coast to Coast AM has talked about this a lot. Art Bell did for a while there before he went off the air. And it's called the shadow people. Shadow people, that's a really, really strange thing because they're not necessarily ghosts. They don't haunt you. They're not banging on your door, ringing your doorbell, not doing anything like that. But they just seem to pop into this world, run across a room, run across the street, run across your yard, whatever the case may be, and they allow you to see them. And they don't have eyes or anything like that. They're just shadows. They call them shadow people because they have the figure of human beings. I've seen these a few times, not very often. I would say I've maybe had less than 10 encounters like this. They've been both indoors and outdoors. I used to go for a walk at night in the town here where I live. I quit doing that because there was some really strange goings-ons. And it's hard to tell if somebody's jacking with you or if you're having a paranormal experience. It just got to the point to where, we don't have a big police department. The cops are not always in every area of the town. I didn't want to risk that somebody was screwing with me and end up getting knifed or whatever. So I quit walking at night. But I used to have these encounters where you could see things flit across the bike path. And I used to take the bike paths and go all over town just to walk and exercise. I still do, but I do it during the day. I don't do it at night anymore. And I had a couple of occasions where you could see these shadow people go across a bike path, and they would go from the grass on one side across a bike path real quick to the other side, then they'd disappear off into the trees. Other times, I could hear voices, but also this park had a lot of trees, a lot of bushes. It may have been people screwing around with me, but I didn't think so, because I would always go look around the bushes and the trees, and there was never anybody there. Sometimes these voices coincided with probably about the 8 or 9 times I saw the shadow people. Maybe about 3 or 4 was with these disembodied voices, or maybe somebody was screwing with me. I don't know, but it would be hard to do the shadow people. It'd be very hard to fake that. I think I don't think that would be an easy thing to do. So it was definitely something that was there. Um, of course, we always, like I said in the beginning, we were talking about vampires. I'm going as a vampire this year. If you saw my other video, you saw the 2 videos that I had where they had the old-fashioned vampire and wolf movies. You know, the whole Wolfman and all that. Really good movies from the old black and whites. And, you know, I found out after doing a lot of research that the whole thing of vampires actually goes back before Vlad the Impaler. A lot of people try to say, well, you know, it goes back to that. Vlad the Impaler, he just impaled people. He was just a nut job. He didn't bite anybody. He just used a stake and impaled people. So I think people kind of took a little bit of this and a little bit of that and formed our current vampire type thing. According to some ancient traditions, mostly out of Eastern Europe, not out of Western Europe. A lot of people look at vampires and see them as having come from Western Europe, but a lot of rumors out of Russia, out of former Russian Baltic states, Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, Poland, Kazakhstan, a lot of the stands, a lot of that is where a lot of these whole ideas of vampires came from, and they go back. Really, they go back to biblical times. They go back thousands of years. What we see today as vampires, as like what you see in Twilight and New Moon, you know, hotties, you know, that was not even where vampires originated from. Originally, vampires were spiritual creatures that tormented humans and eventually tracked you down and killed you. And they were very ugly, very gross looking. They were not what you see in the movies today. Very horrible looking creatures. Trying to think of one country where this was really famous. Everybody says, well, Transylvania, and I'm like, no, this was somewhere else, and I'm trying to remember. There was, I believe it was Bulgaria, was one of the countries where there's a lot of rumors even to this day of vampires living in that country. I'd have to look it up. But the thing has changed over the years. Like I said, if you go back to ancient times, like in the Middle East and China, vampires were spiritual beings. They were very ugly. They would torment and harass you and eventually track you down and kill you. And then, of course, as we went through the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages in Europe, the vampires changed. They became somewhat good-looking. They were like English men who were older, 40s and 50s, who would prey on young women. And then as we came forward, the vampires became somewhat better-looking. It depended on who was doing the movie. Salem's Lot, of course, the vampires or whoever got turned. They could be old guys, young guys, old women, young women. So the story changed depending on, you know, who was doing the movie. And then, of course, you know, we get up into the 90s. We get into Interview with the Vampire. Now you're getting the Hollywood, you know, movie stars playing the vampires. You've got Buffy the Vampire Slayer. You've got Angel. You've got these types of movies, and then you come forward into the 2000s. You've got Twilight, you've got New Moon, um, all kinds of vampire movies in between those. Most not so famous, not so popular, some popular. Forever Night was a show done out of Toronto in the 90s. I've got the whole collection. That only lasted one season, I think, and then it was gone. So you do have these types of shows with the vampires, and it became a very commercial venture in the 90s. Now, are there real vampires? Well, it depends on what you think of a vampire. I mean, if you're a government who has let the Federal Reserve print your money, you're pretty sure that Federal Reserve bankers are vampires. I think we can all agree on that one. Um, there is one possibility, and it's a possibility that I'm working on for a story, for a book that I actually got from a guy out in the Middle East that told me this story. And he told me a story about the Nephilim in the Old Testament of the Bible. Now, the Nephilim are supposed to be the offspring between fallen angels and human females. And that these Nephilim were not only tall, but had supernatural abilities. In fact, they had fangs. Now, as the story progressed, the reason that they had fangs was that they needed human blood to survive. Now, that's where the story began and ended with this guy I talked to. Now, I added to the story for my story on the Nephilim, and the book is called The Nephilim Eyes. The eyes of Nephilim are supposed to be different than human eyes. They're supposed to glow at night like a vampire's. And that's been legend about the Nephilim for a long time. But I added to that. Basically, what I added was that the angel DNA was superior to the human DNA, and that the angel DNA was always destroying the red blood cells of the human side of the DNA chain. So these Nephilim had the fangs. They would go out and they would drink the blood of humans to replenish the human side so they didn't die. So that's my addition to the Nephilim and the vampire saga, which is why vampires need blood, and it also takes us back to the beginning of Genesis, with the fall of angels that came down here and went after human females. At least that's the story postulated by some in the Old Testament genre, including some of your people that are into the Kabbalah, that type of thing. They get into this quite a bit. So that's really what I've got. This is just a first part series on Halloween. I will tell you that this year, last October, I had, some strange feelings going over to the store after dark, which I don't like to do, but I'll do it if I have to. The strange thing of something lurking around, the feeling of something weird. I did have last Halloween, I did have voices that I heard. I thought it was people outside on the street, whatever. I looked out, there was nobody there. Could be something, could be nothing. But this Halloween, I would say what's spooky about this Halloween, it is too quiet. People are too quiet. People are very numb. They're very sullen. And that almost makes for a spookier Halloween than if it was, all people acting crazy. It's a weird year, 2015 is, and who knows what we're going to see here on out. But anyways, that is my first Halloween and the first Halloween stories. If you get a chance, visit the places I mentioned. There is a couple of places here in the Denver metro area. I live up north of Denver. I can go into some of those the next time. I can get into that and give you an idea of what you're dealing with there. One of the things we had is we had a thing, back when I was a kid, they used to talk about it, and it was out here on Riverdale Road. If you look up Riverdale Road, Colorado, or just put in Haunted Riverdale Road, Colorado, or Haunted Riverdale Road, Adams County, you'll come up with an old barn and a house that sit up on top of a hill up above Riverdale Road. The house is gone, but the barn is still there. And I remember when I was in high school, the idea was to go out there, it was a challenge, go walk through the barn while your friends sit in your pickup and drank all your beer, while you walk through this barn shivering, going, "Oh, I don't want to die in here, man. I don't want to die." And you get out and they're like, "Oh, you made it, all right. Oh, by the way, we'll have to go buy some more beer. We drank all your beer." Yeah, it's typical. Thank you very much. But it is listed on the internet, so somebody had to investigate it at one time or the other. But I distinctly remember from the early 80s from high school. Um, and it's on the third dirt road as you're going north off of highway, or south off of Highway 7 down Riverdale Road. It's the third dirt road, and there's a little cattle guard right as you turn off onto the road. There, you go across cattle guard, you go up the hill, and you'll see the barn. It's an old barn built in the 50s, and it's right on the right side of the road as you're going west after you turn off from going south, and you go up that hill. And right as you get to the top of the hill, there's a little driveway there. It's all dirt. You just pull in there. There's no fence, no trespassing signs or anything like that. And if you get a chance to come out this way, go up there and take a look and walk through the barn. That somebody took the doors off the barn a long time ago, so you can walk from one side all the way through to the other side and not have to worry about somebody slamming the doors on you. They took the doors off. There is one more that I know of right off the bat. There's a couple of actually, but I think I'm going to stop here and I'll just let this be Halloween Ghost Stories #1. And then #2, I can get into some of the spookier stuff. I'll do that probably tomorrow night. Some of the spooky things that I encountered or I heard other people encounter that you can kind of look at and say, whoa, that's some spooky stuff. But anyways, I think I'm going to wave off for now. I think I've done all I can for tonight. So anyways, hoped it was entertaining. Like I said, look up those sites earlier in the video that I talked about, because they're all tourist places, and you can go in there. I mean, ghost type stuff happen during the day. You don't have to ask to go in at night. There's people that tell you that they've gone into haunted buildings during the day and weird stuff has happened. So go in any time that they have a tour. Slink around, take your time, kind of hold back from the group and check out these places and see what you find. So anyways, like I said, happy Halloween. This is Billy Bedlam 66 signing off.